Welcome, everybody, to Broadcast Team Alpha, where we bring you cutting-edge conversation while exploring the quantum possibilities. And we are so going to do it again tonight with one of our favorite guests. And Augie's going to tell you about him shortly. But as always, I want to open with some gratitude. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your lively chat. Thank you for the personal messages that you send us. And I just want to do a shout out to our friends over at Conscious Awakening Network. Conversation. Exploring the quantum possibilities. Sorry, I'm hearing background noise. Sorry, guys. I want to do a shout out to our friends over at Conscious Awakening Network. Really go over there and check out what's going on. You'll find Augie and myself streaming over there right now, and you're going to find some other interesting offerings from us and some of our esteemed colleagues that we just love co-creating with. So definitely worth taking a trip over there. And we want to invite you to become a member to our YouTube membership group. Mac will put the link in the chat, and you'll be able to join us for exclusive content only for the members. And, you know, Augie and I test drive some really sensitive information, some vulnerable information there. And, you know, Augie is prolific with his videos. So I highly recommend you go and check them all out. So without any further ado, Augie, please tell us about our guest.
Yes, and here we are again. We have an American that lives in Germany, and this is Frank Jacob, of course. And we are so glad to have him here. And it is 2 a.m. over there, so he is wearing sunglasses so we don't see his red shot eyes. Anyway, Frank
always looks good. Frank always looks good, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I was just trying to have a little bit of fun here. But for those of you that also like to surf the website at the same time you're listening to the show, here is his website is www.imdb.com. imdb.com.
Oh, no. Say
again?
That's my IMDb site. You should just go to jacob.com. Hello.
All right.
Say that again, Frank. Yeah, tell us again the accurate one.
Well, since I'm jumping in here, hello, Augie.
Yeah,
hello.
Jump in.
Yes.
Welcome, Frank.
Well, if you're going to do
Welcome.
that. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Best
website is frankjacob.com. I think somehow you got the IMDb website mixed in there with my bio URL link tree, but forget it. You know, frankjacob.com is probably the easiest place. That way people remember where to go. And here we are.
Perfect.
At 2 a.m. in Bavaria, Germany.
Yeah, we'll see to that it is in the text below, so it'll be there. I do want to say a few things about Frank, because he is really out there. Frank is an international award-winning filmmaker, and most known for his films on the ultimate rush, solar revolution, and packing for Mars. And I just here a day ago I watched Packing for Mars, and I tell you folks, you gotta see that movie because it is so real and it is so good. And he is also sought after guest on radio, TV guests, and he is a frequent speaker at conferences. And he's going to be here in the United States in Las Vegas here in about 3 months or so for a big conference up there. And I'll have him speak a little bit on that. And he speaks on so many different subjects like transhumanism, AI, secret technologies, human evolution, timelines, parallel universes and parallel worlds, time travel, and the looking glass. I seem to remember he actually was the one that broke the story on the looking glass. That is that technology that can see the future. And I don't know where we're going to end up on this show because He can go just about anywhere, but there's two things that is on a lot of people's mind right now, and that one of them is transhumanism, and the other one is AI, artificial intelligence. And maybe we could start with AI, but before I say any more, I will comment to the show.
Thank you for having me, Age and Nori.
Of course. Thank you. So good to have you. And thank you for getting up at 2 a.m. to be here with us. And I just want to say, guys, if there's a little bit of a lag or an awkward moment in between us responding, I'm on the phone today, so that it might be my fault. And I just want to say a shout out to everybody in the chat room. So, Frank, I was reading an article today. This is probably more about transhumanism, but isn't that AI as well? I mean, ultimately.
Well, yes, they're definitely related. Although, they're two different topics, but you could say that the transhumanist agenda will lead us into a world that is dominated by AI, essentially by artificial intelligence, because the artificial intelligence represents the silicon world, and humanity, the biological version of it at least, represents the carbon world. And we're in the middle of kind of decarbonizing our planet, because carbon is such a sinful, even though it's one of the four building blocks of matter,
life.
Of our physical world. It's become one of the most dangerous substances known to the universe of man. So, and we're now moving to silicon, and transhumanism is the migration of human consciousness, at least according to the wet dreams of the progenitors of that idea, like Ray Kurzweil, Yuval Harari, who's their prophet, and others who kind of want to mutate consciousness, which they believe resides between our ears, and download it in some form or other and transfer it into some, immortal vehicle, so that they can become gods. That's where they want to go. They want to become immortal gods. And there's that famous saying by Yuval Harari, when you see his website, or if you see him talking on the World Economic Forum conferences, he says that history began when mankind invented gods, and it'll end when man becomes gods. So that's kind of where they're going. And because they say that, because they believe that artificial intelligence is the superior form of consciousness, and that we will not be able to keep up with artificial intelligence, and therefore we have to merge with artificial intelligence. And that is what transhumanism kind of is in a nutshell. And that way it does, and it does relate to artificial intelligence.
Yes. And all of that might not be so bad if it were just cordoned off to the people who agree with it. But that's not the agenda, and the agenda started with the mRNA, and it's going to be rolled out pretty much against the will of the people that don't want it. Is that true?
Well, you're taking some chances here by mentioning those 4 letters on YouTube. But yes, absolutely. I think it has a lot to do with the final stretch of a plan that has been in formation for well over 100 years, leading us toward this form of society. And these, those 4 letters and the Beetlejuice that are, transferred to the human bloodstream, have within them the operating system that will actually assemble us internally, which is I think the freakiest part of the information that I've encountered in the last, year, has led to the realization of something that I talked about with some of the people that are actually studying and analyzing the Beetlejuice globally. One of them is Dr. Anna Malchia. She is running a practice, a clinic where she has access to dark field microscopy, and which allows her to look at live blood samples, and she can see the development of certain neural networks on a nanoscale within our system, which is in a way, and also the development of microchips and little, robot nanobots they call xenobots, which, for many, many decades sounded like science fiction, but now are basically reality. And I think it's very, very scary for a lot of people to realize that, hey, Ray Kurzweil's idea was to kind of download the human brain. They even had ideas of freezing it and then slicing it into microscopic little like pieces. It's amazing. It's sort of crazy what they were thinking, how they were going to do it. But okay, here we go. So what's happened is that it's gone from the idea of a physical, transferring our brains. Like some people even thought cut their heads off, freeze it, cryogenically, and then in 300 years, when they figured out how to transfer your brain into a hard drive, then thaw it. But now with this new technology, which we're talking about, it's really an operating system to convert substances which have been accumulating in our bloodstream. Like I've been saying, this goes back a long way for really decades. And which is, I can even show you a quick screenshot, if it's all right. Just, you can see some of the latest nanopathology studies that have been done. Here's one by Antoinetta Gatti, and she's showing that, toxic metals in the body are among the highest rise in unexplainable particles, and they're shown here by these red different dots here that I've marked. Those are aluminum, barium, lead, and uranium, and they have no place, they have no business being in our bloodstream. But what's happening is that the Betelgeuse contains an operating system which actually then will assemble those things into those strange microchips that we're talking about. And that's not crazy, because there's even in their own patents, here's a quick screenshot as well of that, that actually confirms something I've been thinking a long time, that it's an operating system technology that they've injected. That's what's going to, actually internally build us, into these future, potentially. This is just my theory. No, I'm still looking for the answers from the experts. But there's even when you look at the last Terminator film called Genesis, I was shocked. I think back last fall, I was doing some research and I was tired at night. And sometimes I just want to put on something and vegetate and not think at the end of the day. And of course, this film, I hadn't seen the last Terminator with Arnold. So what do I see in that film? A scene where there's this guy that, this guy that comes back in time who, Arnold comes out and, blows him away, and they scream at him for, they thought he was a good guy. Well, no, he isn't. And what happens? He's lying there in a pool of blood, and the blood congeals back into his body, and he gets up and he goes, he shakes himself back out of it. He goes, well, that hurt, right? And he's talking about the technology. They're showing the technology, as Hollywood is do, of what this Betelgeuse is actually doing within us right now. And I'd like to know that. That's one of the questions I had for some of the German health minister politicians, about like, hey, what is all this stuff that we're being, was this being filmed and photographed and stuff? So we'd like to know. I'm sure many people would like to know, because we weren't asked. No one asked me and said, hey, Frank, do you mind if I just, put this stuff in your blood and build you into a robot from within? Is that all right with you? Nobody asked that, right? So, okay, August biting at the tongue.
I got to remind us that we're still on YouTube.
Right, we're on YouTube, but I'm trying to carefully steer away.
No, you're doing a great job with your language. Yeah.
I'm being vague. I'll steer away from it, so we can get back into
very nice.
And essentially, we want to stay away from conspiracy theories, people, that that the Betelgeuse is what it is. But it is funny that you're finding all these things, they're being photographed, and it seems to lead to that one conclusion, which leads us back to the topic of what you started with today, which was transhumanism and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and also I think it was the CEO of Motorola, or I think it was one of the major cell phone companies. It says by 2030, it says, we will no longer need to carry these things around, because it'll be all throughout our body, and all we have to do is to think about somebody and set a mental sequence in place, And bingo, we have mental contact with them through the internet, the cloud, and to the other person.
Right.
Wow.
Well, this is what Yuval has been talking about. He's been talking about how we've now penetrated under the skin and that they're actually converting us into they've got patents for this stuff, where they can read your body's movement and they can generate a score and, figure out where you are geographically. So that they can tie you into another important aspect of the transhumanist society is to get us all kind of tied into a database where we have our biometric ID connected to our social media, to our bank accounts, to our presence out there in the world. And, this is, I think, one of the key elements that is going to make this all possible for them is to convince enough people to kind of enter into this virtual world, this virtual reality. They call it the metaverse. Yeah. And I've even got a couple of screenshots here, like the metaverse is something here, like you're seeing now the Apple Vision Pro was just released, right? And many thousands of people were drooling all over this technology, and it's a quantum leap even from where Zuckerberg wanted to go with his Facebook metaverse, which is essentially trying to kind of get us into a virtual holographic world, a simulation, so that we begin to explore the world simply wearing goggles or whatever they're going to give us. Maybe it'll be even less, invasive, and they'll just bring us to a point where we are digital beings. It's the first step toward transferring our physical bodies into a digital body. Eventually, I guess they are really thinking that we will move away from the biological being because they see that this is the scary part, right? Nori and Aga, they see our bodies as something that's inferior, that's flawed. They look at us as a series of code. The DNA is just simply code, which is hackable. Yuval Harari calls us hackable animals. You can just, look on YouTube and you'll see lots of speeches where he talks about us as only being hackable animals. And so that this is how they view us, because let's not forget that the majority of scientists out there are living in an atheistic, heliospheric, or heliocentric, version of the universe where there is no creator. There's only just the Big Bang and everything happened by accident. And so, there's no creator and no guiding force, then, and they can decipher how the creation was built, how the matrix, what all the, the magic behind the matrix, let's just say, then they can try to hack it and make it what they call better, right? They think they can hack our DNA and they can eliminate diseases. They can, people that have lost limbs or have become handicapped or compromised by some injuries or some whatever, they can fix those things. And of course, that's very enticing. And it's very interesting for people to think that, hey, wow, I could become an invincible, perfect person. They could fix all the genetic flaws. Okay. And now this is very enticing. And of course, I'm not going to say that somebody who's missing a limb isn't going to be interested in this technology. And in fact, the cutting edge of the research on the technology is in that direction. So they're going to sell us on this technology for altruistic purposes. But the problem is that the people who are doing this work aren't necessarily living on a very high ethical or moral standard or have any kind of spiritual foundation. So they're all about materialism. And if there's no body that comes in and sort of says, wait a minute here, like, everything you're talking about sounds great, but let's not forget, like, if they're talking about genetic flaws and you're talking about health issues and problems, you can actually trace those to dietary bad dietary practices and the way our society's been built up on artificiality, on preservatives, on chemicals in our system. If we eliminate all that stuff when we get back to nature, our bodies actually are virtually invincible. I mean, they used to live hundreds of years, as was documented. And there's no reason to think that we couldn't make an evolutionary leap at our genome level, on a biological level, to enter into kind of a superhuman state without having to adopt artificiality. but they're not telling us about that, because that's the more difficult, disciplined way of getting there. You can't just take a pill and everything is solved. You actually have to, become a spiritual person. You have to become a more holistic person. You have to think about things that may affect your real estate, because your body is, in a sense, your real estate. And if you don't know how your body works and your own real estate, then, well, in a way, shame on you, because that is the gift that you were given to navigate through.
Right.
And if you've polluted it and you've neglected it and you've accepted the stories that were given to you by these heliocentric based atheistic scientists as to how the nature of reality is, well, then you're going to be misled down the garden path toward this transhumanist artificial world without even having realized what you really had under your nose the whole time that you could have achieved. Exactly. Right? That's the scariest part for me personally, is to know that, we didn't really give us a chance. Right now, we already are entering into the transhumanist artificial intelligence world without even having a chance to have developed who we really are as human beings to our fullest capacity.
Exactly. And I was thinking before, when you were talking about Augie was talking about whatever they're going to put into each other's heads so that we can think about each other and have communication with each other through the computer. Well, there's a lot of us out there who are starting to practice that right now, and being diligent about honing our spiritual life, so that we can do that without having to have something artificial put in our head. And to your point, Frank, which, you're preaching to the choir about taking care of your body. I was just reading today, I found this doctor who I thought was fabulous, but based on the amount of money he's asking people for consultations, I'm not sure what side he's on, but his point is we have to stop growing cancer. So to me, that was so clear that it's not just something that happens, it's not just the odds are not with us, that we have power and we have choice and we can do something about, these maladies that happen to us that we kind of choose,
Yeah, and I think it's almost to the point right now that Elon Musk's brain chip that he's developing is already outdated, because they have the capabilities now through the nanobots that is already in about half the population of the world right now. I think they have the capability of assembling themselves into, like you said, a computer chip. And from there on, their selling point, I know it. I don't think it's come yet, but I know the selling point is going to be that for those of you that go along with this, you will have all the knowledge and the information on the internet at your disposal.
No, please go. Yes.
No, you're right. I mean, that's their selling point, and it's clear because we're talking about materialists here, and selling is an important part of materialism. And the neural networks that we have in our brain are actually being emulated. I mean, it goes back to the 50s and 60s and the famous Delgado experiments, where he took a bull, in a raging bull in a bullfight, and by hooking them up to sensors, he was able to pacify this back in the 1960s. So, this technology and this research has not stopped then. It just has been expanded since then. And it's kind of like really crazy, this kind of Frankenstein, world that they've developed, because I was just, I had every now and then, and I mean, actually, what am I saying? Quite often in my life, I pick up on people on the other side of the planet or someplace else. Just, like I think of a person, and if I'm clear and if I'm still and not, my brain isn't just flustered with gazillions of ideas and thoughts and things like that. I pick up those things, and it's amazing. Then all of a sudden, like, for example, I was just thinking of somebody that knows the inventor, that knew the inventor of the chronovisor personally and spent many hours with them. And they're living in another country. And we spoke, I think, about half a year ago. And then we kind of left it like open, like, hey, we should reconnect at some point. And then just the other day, I was with Tanya Maidenford together, who's my partner, the production partner in our films. You mentioned Packing for Mars earlier. And I was saying, hey, we should actually reconnect with this person. And I'd been receiving a bunch of calls the last couple of days, but we're so heavily immersed in post-production on a new project that I've been ignoring everybody. I've just been, not answering. And sure enough, I went back in my phone log and there was a call from this person. And I traced it back really to the moment that I was thinking about her. And if that's not proof of our telepathic ability, I don't know what it is. What is? And this isn't unusual. This happens to me quite often, which means that we all have inherent in us the internet, the biological internet, the neural network that exceeds outward, outside of our bodies, outside of time and space, and where there is another dimension which we function from. And in that dimension, we can also communicate with each other. And that is outside of time and space, like I said, and that means that it's instantaneous and it's not bound by the laws of physics as our bodies are. And again, it's just a shame that we're not exploring this more actively, but instead are choosing a limited form of reality, which is fixed inside of the dimensions of time and space.
I will ask anybody listening out there a simple question. How many times have you had the phone ring and you think of somebody at the same time and you grab the phone and that's that person? It happens not all the time, but it happens ever so often to people.
Yeah, it does. We covered it in our film Solar Revolution.
Yeah. It's right there in front of us if we recognize it.
So,
Nora,
Frank,
you sound like you want to say something.
Nori?
I do. Musk and, all those guys, are they going to get these implantable products, or are they just going to sell them and implant them in other people? What do you think?
I'm just, a lot of people ask that question about Elon Musk, and it seems like he's one of the good guys, but then again, he does things that make it seem like he's not one of the good guys. And it just all these technologies that he's been developing. The answer for me is that he can't be tuned into real truth, or at least he can't be aligned with presenting the real truth to the world, because he keeps selling us on technologies which are obsolete, such as using rockets to get to Mars and SpaceX and all those things. Doesn't he know that teleportation has already been a reality? Doesn't he know that we no longer need rockets to get outside of the bubble around the planet and travel into other planets and things like that? Doesn't he know that? Like a lot of people know that. Isn't he interested at all? And doesn't he realize that the guy whose cars he's named after, Nikola Tesla, already had made communications with beings from other worlds at the turn of the 18th to the 19th to the 20th century? Is he not interested in this? Does he not realize that there is such a thing as other forms of energy? So we don't need to use fossil fuels, or we don't need to use any kind of I guess with the rockets they use oxygen, like hydrogen peroxide, and all these outdated, obsolete, old-fashioned technologies are being developed by him on a large scale. Isn't he interested in maybe developing a form of energy which would be free, not only for him, and make it possible for him to achieve much greater goals with his space program, and at the same time revolutionize the planet by creating a form of energy freely available to everyone without having to destroy Mother Earth and the planet? Doesn't that interest him at all? And why did he spend $44 billion on Twitter and not $4 billion investing investment in setting up a campus where 10 of the most promising free energy inventors could get together with their backs held free to develop this new technology in a very public way, so that you couldn't just squash it or silence it or put them out of business. Is he not interested in that? This is one of the questions I have for an Elon Musk. Because why don't you open your mouth? He's opening his mouth about a lot of other stuff that is supposedly controversial, that people immediately call him an anti-Semite, or they call him like a pro-Trumper or whatever it is. You know, that's like a nasty word these days. You know, he's happy to jump on and provoke in areas of topics that have been declared safe controversial topics by the mainstream media. Right? It's like, it's, you know, right?
Yes. So it makes me ask, is he reading from the approved script? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know.
Right. I mean, the thing is, at some point, you have to realize, you have to make that leap where you realize that what you're seeing in the mainstream is just, you know, Hollywood by ugly people in a way. You know, it's all scripted. There's all a narrative that's been created for the stage of the politicians in the world, which are put out on the mainstream outlets, the television sets and the computer screens. But when you think about it, I mean, it sounds they make these people sound so powerful. Like, oh my God, Putin is going to meet with Trump and the handshake, and like it's like, and they're all traversing on, and you know, if you worked it out to the square mile of how much area those people actually, you know, move on, you know, including their little parliamentary houses and their White Houses, whatever it is, there's probably less than 10 square miles of space that they use to, you know, they move around on, and that's their stage, right? That they televise. And it seems like this giant global force. And yet the whole planet, by comparison, would make them seem like a grain of sand in terms of importance of physical size and physical displacement. And yet we have given them the power by giving our belief that they are something important, and that they have decisions to make that are worth listening to. And the minute we stop doing that, the minute it's over for them. They're resting on the idea that we're giving them their power by our belief in them. It's the same thing you could say that's going on. You saw this Bud Light controversy, right? People boycotted Bud Light, right? And then what did they do? They showed that Bud Light's stock tanked, right? They lost 25% of their stock value overnight, which translated to $300 billion in revenue losses, right? And everyone was like, right? We took down Bud Light, right? Well, you know what? Bud Light is just a small company within a greater umbrella organization where $300 billion means nothing. Okay, so it's not really going to hurt them. But what's interesting about the Bud Light thing is that it's a key to how we actually can topple the bad guys, because there's more of us than there is of them. Pure, sheer magnitude force of us versus them. And it shows you that if we were to say, for example, you know what? We're done paying taxes. All of us. We're going to boycott the IRS, all of us at the same time in America, right? 380 million people suddenly say, we're not paying taxes. Guess how long it would take for the IRS to tank? It would be over. The political system would end, because they're just sucking our energy, because we believe we still need to pay them. We still believe in some kind of that they need this money for the infrastructure, which they're not building. Last time I landed in America and got out of a plane and rented a car and got on the highway, it was like boom, boom, boom. I felt like I was in Beirut. You know, I mean, you guys should come to Germany and drive the Autobahns. You don't feel, they say on the Autobahns, they have sign, slow down because there's a bump. And then I'm like, you know, bump? What bump?
Was that a bump?
Like, boom, you know, that was it, right? For the next 50 kilometers, right? So, I mean, there's a difference, right? I'm not praising and proud of, like, you know, what's going on in Germany in the political spectrum, but I'm just making a bad example here. The thing is, we have the power to do something. And so so things like Bud Light are an incentive for us to kind of say, hey, we did it with Bud Light. You know, there's something else coming on the horizon, you know, CBDCs, digital currencies. We could say, no, we're done. We're not doing that. We're off digital. Forget it, people. We're not doing it. What are they going to do? If we don't cooperate, they can't do anything. It can do nothing.
Exactly.
So these are the kind of ways I think that we can, people always ask about solutions. How can we fix the problem?
Yeah.
And one of the reasons we don't fix the problem, and I know you want to jump in here, Aga, is because we rely on this idea of the white hat. The white hat is going to come rolling into town, and they've already got the plan worked out, people. You just don't realize that they're working on the plan, and just sit back, eat the popcorn, and drink your sodas. All unhealthy things, by the way. But they're going to come rolling into town, and they've got this plan worked out, and they've had it worked out for a long time, but it just isn't time yet for the plan. Meanwhile, another, 10,000 Ukrainians have to die in a meaningless war, and a bunch of other people have to starve to death, and et cetera, et cetera. This is all justified under the delay of the plan, execution of the plan by the White Hats plan ideology that people still, to this day, in the New Age and Awakening community believe in. What they need to realize is that we are the white hats, and the Bud Light, boycott is the example of how we could be activated, all of us as white hats, to shut down anything we don't agree with, anything, no limitations whatsoever.
Exactly.
So absolutely.
So well said.
It may get to that. It may have to come to that. But you mentioned something here about 45 seconds ago about cryptocurrency. And I'd like to have your opinion on how far do you think the government will force people to be part of that? I know they have ways to do that for people that is interacting with them all the time, like maybe Social Security and things like that. But private individuals that don't need anybody, independent, will they actually force people to be part of this, do you think?
Yes, they will. Absolutely. They have to do it all or none. It's all in for them. There is no compromise. They have to move us onto a digital network connected with our biometric ID, because that is the next step in their execution, their plan. I don't know if I showed it. Did I show it to you earlier? This is a headline. Yeah, I think I showed it to you. Like Trudeau, right? And like here, this headline here says, it's a quote from Klaus Schwab. It says, "To me, the big question is, how are we going to go through this transformation? It cannot be gradual. It has to be driven by a certain shock that will happen," right? So the shock that he's talking about, we have to ask, like, what is that shock going to look like? There could be lots of ways that a shock could be precipitated. A shock was COVID-19, right? It was a shock. How long did it take? How many countries? 176 or 180 countries in the world to get into lockstep? 2 weeks? That would be impossible if you tried to negotiate a contract about, the implementation of a certain regulation, in automobiles or something like that. It would take decades, right? But no. They showed in this shock situation that they could convert us into a lockstep concept within 2 weeks' time if we had enough fear. And so fear is the ingredient. I guess, the way you can identify is when, what they're going to do is by the fear factor. How afraid are you of what's coming? And if it, like, for example, they've done studies to figure out how long people would hold out if they were not allowed to, like if their cash was worthless, and they had to move to digital currency. There's going to be those people who put up a resistance. How long can they resist? What is the average? They've done studies. You know what the average is? 72 hours.
Really?
That's what I was going to say 3 days, but yeah.
So that's the average. That means there's going to be some hardcore people out there that will last a couple of weeks, and there's some people that are going to capitulate right away. Essentially, they're going to bring, if you can't eat, and you're starving in your family and blah blah blah, you're going to go down, and you're going to be afraid of dying. And we've got a primal fear of death. I mean, in the ultimate sense, that's the biggest fear. We're afraid of death because they believe in a materialistic world where there is no spirit, there is no soul, there is no creator sense of you're not a creative being. You're just a piece of meat, with atoms and molecules that have smashed together so often to create consciousness. Of course, they're afraid of death, but they're ignoring the massive body of evidence and work by people that have had near-death experiences and been back to report on what happened. People like Eben Alexander that have, that their whole neural networks, even the part, he was a neuroscientist, by the way, even the part that he, as a skeptic, used to believe was active, that allowed for people to have these what he called hallucinogenic experiences when they were in, under, and they were seeing, where their glasses were put in what drawer in the operating table. He still wrote that off as some kind of a hallucination picked up by a certain part of the brain. Even that part of the brain was dead in Eben Alexander. So in his experience, so that would, there's no way to explain certain situations, and we don't talk about this in the mainstream. And that if we did, we would get past the idea that death is the end. And we would, if we had a society where we didn't, fear death in that sense, what would be left for them? They wouldn't even be able to hold that in front of us and say, "Oh, you're going to die." Right? We're like, all right, so what? I'm going to move on. My consciousness will move on. These ideas have to do with fear. So you're going back to your original question of, will everybody do this? Yes, they will, because they will be afraid of whatever shock, as we just read, Klaus Schwab and his buddies, Schwabsters, are going to be presenting to us. The next shock experience will be hopefully one they can use to trigger something that they want to bring in, and that has to do with CBDCs, digital banking, currency connected with our biometric ID. And if we are, not vigilant, and if we continue to reside in this limited perspective of consciousness, then we will likely fall for their stupid trick, I'm afraid.
Right.
Or, I mean, what else does it come down to, right?
Exactly. So I'm just going to take a little side road for a minute, if I may. There's a question. Margaret in the chat room asks, what technology are the super soldiers using to regenerate? Do you know? Like the med beds, or?
Well, I don't believe in the med bed thing so much,
No?
But I do know
Really?
that for example, one of the things that they can do is they can regenerate neural networks. These these 4-letter substances, Beetlejuice substances that they've been using and creating. Those aren't our version or exposure to them are only the consumer end. As we all know, the military uses these products much more and greater in advance of time before we get to them. So the frontier of development of these artificial neural networks has to do with what's being developed in the military. So super soldiers that have, for example, that have lost body parts, or, they've been knocked out, they can, technically, according to the science that I've been encountering and reading about, they actually can regenerate and emulate our own neural networks. They can go into your brain, and these things can pass the blood-brain barrier. They're so small that they can actually enter your brain, and they can begin to form the exact same neural networks that we already have by displacing your own natural neural networks and emulating them with this artificial version of the neural network. Once they've done that, the next feature or capability, or that they have, is that they can program you from the outside. They can send instructions to you. They can send voices, messages, so that you think these can be military instructions. They could be, ideas. They could be, and whatever they decide, whatever they want to work with, they can put that into the brain of these so-called super soldiers. And that's how they have these people that follow their instructions like automatons. What do many of the super soldiers say after they've woken out of their, days?
Right.
They recall
The voice.
certain things, but many of their memories are blanked out because they know they were at some place, but they don't know what they were thinking. And this is totally in line with what we're learning about the Beetlejuice and what it does within our own neural networks. So that's one way you could say that, this ties into the super soldier thing. Now, I don't know about the growing of limbs and all that stuff. I mean, technically, they also say that there's something that they perfected called cloning, and that they can transfer, things into a clone. But when I think about this technology that they're developing right now with the neural networks and the xenobots that are actually able to repair, if they can send things into your bloodstream, and that's one of the selling points. Again, we talked about selling that they can repair tissue and rebuild tissue. So we hear also stories of the super soldiers describing how they lost a limb, but it was grown back or whatever. So, I mean, do they really need clones? In a way, clones already are obsolete. Yeah. So, I mean, it makes you think about a lot of the stories that we've been, exposed to over the last 10 or so years when more of these super soldiers come out. Even the stories, I mean, going as far as those who say they were abducted by ETs and they had implants in them. And then they later had, some doctor pull implants out of them. And, and so I think about, wait a minute, okay, we're supposed to believe that those ETs who abducted those people and put implants in them are an advanced civilization. Well, we're only about 20, 30 years beyond the point where we started reporting the abduction cases. And we've already developed technology which far surpasses chips or probes or whatever implants that these extraterrestrials apparently use. So whoever these extraterrestrials were or are, they're obviously way behind us technologically on that level, because they wouldn't need to put implants in you. They would just, inject something in your blood and it would become whatever they needed. They'd be light years ahead of where we are with mRNA technology, right? It makes you wonder about how many of these stories are psychological aberrations of people who have been, they're looking for an explanation. What did they lean on?
Of course.
The technological state of things that they know from society around them rather than the truth.
Right.
Sorry, and maybe I've just insulted a bunch of but, I had to ask myself that question. And we've been doing a film about extraterrestrials. And I asked that question to some of the people too. And very few people gave me a really good answer to that.
Yeah, and I don't want to proffer fear, but there is a group of people who are on board with the small percentage that is controlling everything that are not so ethical. And if you are a targeted individual, when you went in to get your gallbladder out, it is not out of the realm of possibility that, somebody dropped a little implant in there. It wasn't an alien. It got put in there medically when something else was happening. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, because, there's so many people, and it's calmed down a lot now, but when it was first happening to so many people, it was the brain technology that was hitting them, and people were all over the internet saying, oh my God, this is happening to me. I'm seeing things, I'm feeling things, and that kind of calmed down a little bit. But I have to tell you, I was driving Pennsylvania from West Virginia, and it was still late afternoon, and I felt this force that I could not describe. And if I were not the incredibly strong person that I am, based on the hell that I've walked through, my eyes felt as if they were being pulled in two different directions.
Wow.
So I'm a nurse, and I'm going, am I having a stroke? I didn't have any of the symptoms, and I'm trying to clear my vision so I could, drive properly. And I stopped at, I don't know, one of the convenience stores, and I got an aspirin in the event that I was having a stroke. And it stayed that way. My eyes are being pulled in two different directions. So I'm driving along in the car. I'm going, God, can you help me out here? I'm just trying to make myself, feel light about it, knowing it's probably something, but I'll probably get through it. And then when I got to my destination, my friend was experiencing the same thing with her eyes, and I was not anywhere near, my destination when that was happening. So I don't know what that is. I don't know if there are planned energies, like, okay, let's target this part of Pennsylvania, every week at this hour, or then West Virginia here. I don't know if that's happening, but it sure felt nefarious. It really did.
Well, you're opening another topic, actually, in a way, because I've been I've been working over here in Europe, and Tanya and I together actually we've done several shows with a German biophysicist, Dieter Burs, and one of the things he does is he studies solar activity, and in particular related to solar activity, the whole planetary and ecosystem in a way. And one of the things that's part of that is called the Schumann frequencies. And the Schumann frequencies are tied to they're in resonance at a certain frequency, which is 8 hertz, which resonates with the human brain, with a particular part of the human brain. And if you look at what's been going on with the Schumann frequencies, I'll just put this up on the screen here. This is some recent data that is showing us that the measuring devices that are used to read the Schumann frequencies and monitor them are going off the scale to the point where they're they're just blowing out because they're not able to maintain reading energy levels as high as the ones that have been loading into the Schumann frequencies. And because how things are, when two things go into resonance, there's that famous opera singer with the crystal glass example. He sings at the same, and then the glass shatters, right? Well, our brains aren't that plastic. Our brains are much more plastic than a glass, so we will not shatter our brains, but we will be affected by what's going on. And the other aspect to that, what's going on in the Schumann frequency, is CERN. And I've talked a lot about CERN too, because you can see here in some recent CERN data, when you see these spikes here, this is when they go with what they're calling basically instantaneous luminosity. They're firing CERN up here at 6,799 gigavolts, right? Giga electron volts, which is almost full capacity. They're each of these these beams that they're firing up, I think they're at basically maximum 7,500. So they're 14 tera electron volts, 14 trillion electron volts is their maximum. So what we're seeing is that there seems to be a correlation between CERN being fired and somehow affecting, because there's CERN operates with gigantic magnetic fields. And those magnetic fields and those energy charges and surges are bigger at CERN than they are in any other point on the planet. And we know that CERN often operates in conjunction with HARP and in conjunction with the Schumann frequencies. So is there a relationship between CERN and the Schumann frequencies? I mean, I'll leave that open. I don't want to be carrier or whatever, but I mean, there seems to be a lot of correlated evidence that it is. And the other thing that's happening is that right now the Earth's magnetosphere is diminishing, and we happen to be in a place in the cosmos where we're getting way more energy from the center of the galaxy than we've ever gotten in recorded history. So this is another aspect of cosmic orchestration, which is, you could say, benevolent, which is another clue to how we may, use this energy to rise into another state of consciousness, into what people call the fifth dimension or whatever they want to call it. But there is evidence that our brains are locked into these energy fluxes from the center. But at the same time, they're messing with CERN. So it's no longer to be ruled out that when you have an experience like that, Nori, with your eyes, and other people have different experiences. And I've had some experiences recently where I felt extreme fatigue all of a sudden. And like, how am I going to get out of this state? I can hardly keep my eyes open at 3 p.m. And then, it's just no longer to be ruled out that they're not experimenting with us using the Schumann frequencies tied into our brains and affecting our brains and our consciousness as well. So, and then now I think about it, like, okay, those periods pass. And then in the recent, weeks, I've been full on, right? I've been on a speaking tour, and it's like constant go, go, go. And it's like, I'm cool. I'm fine. No problem. Right. So, it fluctuates. So first of all, I would recommend never getting too emotionally involved in what you did, like by saying, hey, God, what's going on? It's probably the best thing you can do is to, and I've been told by people that are psychic, that, hey, like, look, what you should do is you've got all these helpers around you and in the spirit realm. And I'm like, well, I never see any of them. They're like, well, they're there. So if you need them, ask for help. So I've started doing that, even though I don't know, I can't see them and I can't rely on them. just like I can't rely on white hats. But, hey, why not say, look, if you guys are out there, and you really do want to participate from your part of the dimension into ours, then I'm giving you permission. You can come in and you can organize things to make it easier to get rid of this or to protect me or to make something work in our favor. So I think that's something we should also practice, whether it's true or not, because what does it hurt you to extend you're an invitation to another dimensional being and say, hey, look, if you're there if you're there for my highest good, and if you're there to resonate with me and to work from your side of the fence toward this evolutionary leap that we're about to make, then let's do it. Rock on, bring it, and do it. And if you do that, then I'm sure you felt better once you did that too, because it has worked for me. It has actually delivered results.
It does. And honestly, the minute I open my eyes in the morning now, because the benefits have been noteworthy, I invite them to help me, like just right from the beginning, right from the beginning of my day, and it, like you said, it can't hurt. It can't hurt as long as you're clear on who you're communicating with. Absolutely.
Right. Key point.
Absolutely.
And also, important not to be obsessive with it. And I don't want to continue like, oh my God, am I going to win the ticket? Please bring in. Oh, am I going to get fresh vegetables? Oh, my, and it's like you can go overboard, right? Just use it for the key things. Like when you really need it, and try to rely on yourself, and everything else, but when it's really down to it and you're really having a hard time, then and that's my personal rule. I mean, I can't force them on anybody else, but I think that if we give it more value, if we elevate its assistance to tasks which are superhuman rather than dumb, materialistic goals that I want a new car. Right. Can you make that new car happen? And no. No, and unless you need a new car because you're going to go on a speaking tour to change the world, that's different. Okay,
yes, but even then, we need to come at it from a place of power. We need to come at it from our own high vibration, not from a vibration of fear and begging and oh, can you please help me this time? I mean, when my eyes are being pulled into my temples, I'm like, all right, let's see what I can do here. So I was jokingly, God, can you help me out here? And I'm closing one eye, and did okay with that eye and tried the other. Okay, that eye was better. It relieved some of the discomfort and I was able to safely get to my destination. But, in time gone by, that would have freaked me out and landed me in the emergency room. And that's so unnecessary. And my whole point is, a lot of what we're talking about is the powers that are trying to control us are looking to make us scared, just like the cryptocurrency, just like the GMO. And it's really, incumbent upon us to strap on our spiritual boots, strap on our unity, stay with like-minded people, stay close with like-minded people, and really try and come from a place of power, no matter what we see coming down the line. Sorry, I got on a soapbox. I'm sorry.
No, awesome. No, I mean, I totally wholeheartedly agree. It's just we have to realize that we are creator beings. We're so powerful. And we've been told that we're dwarves when we're giants. We just have all these abilities, and we just need to embrace those. We are we're the rulers of this earth, all of us together. We don't need rulers to tell us that they're the rulers and that we have to follow their rules. No, we are the ones that are in charge here. This is our planet. Stop believing that you're in some, that you're not part, you're not the body and you're in a simulation. And it's like that stuff only takes you away from what you really do have. You have this amazing body, and until you can walk through that wall, don't tell me about this is all just a simulation and I'm not the body. And like, okay, great. I mean, let's, assume that we come from outside of time and space and rein our bodies into this physical matrix. But hey, everyone seemingly wants to come here. And these transhumanists are seemingly wanting to take control over here and get rid of us. So there must be something to this. There must be something really valuable about being a human. And maybe it's that we are the rulers of this planet and not them. And so we have to take that power back, and we have to, operate out of a place of being kings and queens of consciousness, of this world that we are living in. And we need to take possession of it. We can't put it outside of ourselves. We can't move into the metaverse. We got to stop believing these ideas of multi-dimensional universes. It's all this stuff. You know where that comes from, the multiverse, the quantum physics models and all that. And I'm a big embracer of this, language and stuff, and was for a long time. But if you look deeper into it, you realize where it comes from is atheism and the idea that there is no creator. Because a multiverse had to happen because, hey, there's no way our universe could be so fantastic, beautiful, and well organized, and such order in the universe around us. It's just impossible if there isn't a creator. Then the only way it is possible if there isn't a creator is that there's a big bang in the cosmic foam, millions and billions and trillions of times every single moment of time. And every one of those big bangs creates a new universe, and most of them are going to be a disaster. And eventually, in eternity, over multiple dimensions, one of those universes that is going to happen out of a big bang is going to be our universe, the one that's perfectly ordered. That's how they explain the heliocentric model of the universe. And it's the greatest conspiracy theory I've ever heard, because it has an error. It's prone to errors to the level of 10 to the power of 120. Now, you do an experiment as a scientist where your margin of error in proving your thesis is off by 10 to the power of 120. What do? You throw that model away, right? I mean, if you're off by a factor of 5, it might still be doable. You can rearrange your experimental parameters to make the experiment work. But 10 to the power of 120? Sorry, man. I can't follow it, right? So, but because the academic world has been dominated and taken over by people that are proponents of this heliocentric view, we go and study and we learn their language, and we don't even question that there might be another version, like the electric universe, for example, that talks more about consciousness and how fractal everything is, and why the same patterns keep coming up again and again, and how is it possible that we're finding galaxies that are way out there that are coming toward us if the Big Bang is moving outward? I mean, all these problems that they have, right, that they come up with another solution for in the heliocentric model to add to another 0 to the negative to 10 to the power of 120, simply to hold on to the idea of there is no creator. There cannot be a creator. There cannot be a soul. There cannot be a spirit. So we have to, ditch that stuff and realize, yes, no, we are creators and we're very powerful, and we need to take control and charge of our universe. And that's the solution. That's how to get out. And we need to say no to the digital world, no to the transhumanism, the strong artificial intelligence, which is the one I think you talked about in the very beginning, Age, was, the one that's the danger, right? The strong intelligence is the one that's going to wipe out. Even the developers and scientists in artificial intelligence are warning us that artificial intelligence will lead to the extinction of the human race. Well, it's strong artificial intelligence. So we need to say, no, there's got to be a kill switch to the artificial intelligence that's doing this. We have to be in charge, and we have to learn how to figure out a way to bring artificial intelligence symbiotically, into to work side by side with us, not to dominate our world and to step into a silicon world and sell us short of what we really are as human consciousness.
And that's our job, and many of us are laying down on that job. We really need to start doing more. And that involves both Joe Blow and Harry Hohandle down the street. They need to come off the couch and start doing something too. But by golly, we are out of time. Hey,
we are. This was great. Great.
Well, it's been good. It started off kind of, I wanted to say something when you were saying about my bio that I'm an American. Well, I've adopted Americanism to my being, but I'm actually not American. I'm actually Canadian. So, so you have it on the record for next time. But I'm a universal citizen. So, I'm now in Germany. I've lived in America. I've lived in Canada. I've lived in other countries. it's highly recommended to anybody to maybe move out of America and go try living someplace else, just to get a new perspective on how much brainwashing all of you are subjected to over there. You always make fun of the Russians, right? It's all the Russians and stuff, but who are brainwashing their people. Well, I mean, being outside of the American bubble, I can tell you, you guys are subjected to a lot of brainwashing, and you may want to take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
That's a very good note to end on. Very good note to end on. Frank, thank you so much. You have got to come back in the very not too distant future and update us, because things are changing so quickly. And thank you for what you do. Thank you for, being out on the speaking circuit and helping to awaken those that are willing to awaken, because let's face it, not everybody is willing. So thank you so much. And Augie, you want to take us out?
Yeah, and tell us one more time where people can find your publications and what you do.
Okay, thanks again. Yeah, the best, easiest place to find me is my name, Frank Jacob, which, .com. So Frank with a K, Jacob with a C. And you should have links at the top of that website that lead you to my YouTube channel. And if you are interested in something I did last year called the Tale of Two Timelines webinar, you'd find a link to it there. And anything else, like you can reach out to me. There's a contact form on that website if you want to impart some messages, important information to me. I'm reachable. So that would be the easiest way. And I'm as you said, I'm going to be speaking at the Alien event in Las Vegas between the September 14th and 17th. So maybe we can, I'll give you a link or something. You can put that below. So if people want to get tickets or something and they get that link, then I might actually benefit from it too, because I think I'm supposed to get a certain amount of people there to offset my expenses. I've got to put it out of my own pocket to go there. And that's about it, I think, for now.
That sounds good. All right, and folks,
wonderful.
Go and watch that movie, Packing for Mars. You are really going to like it.
I'm doing that right now.
Thank you.
Links to those films are also on my website, by the way. We have Solar Revolution, Packing for Mars, Klaus Donner Chronicles. They're the antidote to the dumbing down of society. Good starting points, anyway.
Sounds good.
Really nice.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody in the chat room. Yep, thank you on the replay. We love you so much, and we'll see you Friday. Join us Friday, 7:30 p.m. for the Grit and Glory of Ascension Symptoms. See you then, guys. Bye-bye.
Yes, bye-bye.